Yeah. It's the white rhino, or the square-lipped rhino. You see that huge square lip in the front there. The reason why it's called the white rhino is the early Dutch people called it the white lip, and the English couldn't pronounce white, so they called it white. There's no difference in color between the white and the black rhino. The proper name for this animal is the square-lipped rhino, and the black rhino is the hook-lipped rhino. He's got a small little mouth with like a prehensile tip on his top lip. And he's called the black rhino. Being a browser, you always find him in thick bush. And it also suits his temperament. I wouldn't get out near a black rhino like this. I wouldn't even dream of doing it. Okay, now you see the horns have been taken off. The horns were taken off to try and protect the rhino from the poachers. You know, he lost 9 rhino. Well, actually he lost 6 rhino, and he removed all the horns. Then as soon as the horns started growing again, you can see there's about 100 millimeters of horn there again. They came in and they started killing the rhino for that stub on the horn. So this is why John Hume has decided he had too many rhino on the property and it's time to thin them out. He's got about 900 rhino in total around the country, in farms around the country. Yeah, you know, having a guy like that, it gives you a bit of hope for the rhino's future. Now, the reason why the Chinese, the Vietnamese and the Yemeni Arabs believe that the rhino horn is an aphrodisiac is the rhino belongs to the Testiconda family, which means that their testicles are up inside near the kidneys. That's the rhino, the elephant, the hippopotamus and the rock hyrax. Now the rock hyrax can regulate his body temperature by going into the shade. The hippo regulates his body temperature by going in the water. Okay, but these guys cannot regulate their body temperatures. So their sperm heats up, the rhino and the elephant. And as soon as the sperm heats up, it becomes a very poor quality sperm. So they have substituted large amounts of poor quality sperm for a small amount of good quality sperm. So the rhino, when he mates with the female, he'll mount her for an hour at a time. He'll mount the female for an hour at a time and ejaculate probably 15 or 16 times in that hour. And each time it's a cup and a half full of sperm. So the Chinese and the Arabs reckon that his sexual power is stored in his horn because it looks like an erect phallus. Now the Chinese grind the powder and they drink it as a ground powder. So do the Vietnamese. Now the Vietnamese have also put it out that rhino horn cures AIDS. So that's going to be another burden on these poor guys. And the Yemeni Arabs believe that when a young man comes 18 years old and he's ready to take his first concubine, if he's then presented with a ceremonial dagger that the handle is made out of rhino horn, it'll increase his libido and he'll be able to keep his concubine happy. A big rhino male, he will weigh around about 2,400 kilograms, and the female about 2,200. So they are huge animals. In the early 1950s, there were only 50 of these left in the wild. And the Parks Board, hey, back off. Parks Board collected the wild rhinos and put them into Umfolozi Game Reserve in KwaZulu-Natal. And then they bought excess rhinos from zoos around the world. Particularly male rhinos, so they can get a huge genetic cross-section. And as of, well, before the poaching started about 4 years ago, there was 8,000 white rhino in South Africa, starting from the early 1950s on that breeding project. These guys breed extremely well. The black rhino not so, because the black rhino is solitary, he's very, very aggressive, and quite often before the male can find the female when she's in ovulation, you know, when she's ready to conceive, she's already past that stage, and even though he will mate with her, she won't conceive. You know, it has to be at that particular time. Now nature has designed it that way because of the amount of food that's available to the black rhino. You know, during the winter months there's hardly anything, just twigs. So if there's an overpopulation of black rhino, they're going to die out. Okay. And the oxpeckers that we see on the rhino, by the early 1960s, they were extinct in South Africa because of the fluids that the farmers were using to rid their livestock of parasites. You know, they were using arsenical-based fluids and things like that. And then the oxpecker comes and picks on the tick that's half dead, and then he dies because he's got an overdose of arsenic. And in 1963, they found a big breeding colony of red-billed oxpeckers in northern Namibia. And they captured a couple of hundred birds, brought them back into the Kruger National Park and released them. And they've now recolonized the whole of the Kruger National Park, and they're going out into the lowveld. I mean, like here now, there's hundreds of them on this property now. And the same thing with the yellow-billed oxpecker. This is the red bull. Now the yellow-billed is a lot scarcer. They found a couple of them about 5 years ago, and they've reintroduced them into the park again, and they are slowly breeding up and spreading out again. Now an interesting thing, guys, you will not find an oxpecker on an elephant. Even though it's a warm-blooded animal, you will not find an oxpecker on an elephant. The reason for that is the elephant hasn't got sebaceous glands, which in turn produces sebum in the blood, which attracts the parasites. So you won't find parasites on an elephant. So therefore, it's not because the Ellie's got a trunk and he can swat them. It's just that they know that there's no parasites on the elephant.